Hello, I'm Bill Banham, co-host of the People and Performance podcast. The ability to draw insights based on performance data, demographic data, recruitment, retention rates, skill data, and opinion data means that HR can provide valuable insights to business leaders. This is the future that HR has been pushed towards because of the pandemic. In this panel discussion today, we're going to talk about all things HR and recruitment tech, plus do a deep dive into people analytics, and we're going to offer a little bit on blockchain as well. I'm joined today by three amazing, awesome, fabulous panelists. The PMP's pod's very own Chris Bjorling, who's also the CEO over at Fidello, a consulting and services firm specializing in improving human performance. Dave Millner, author, futurist, and consulting partner at HR Curator Ltd. Check out HR Curator on Twitter and elsewhere. He's all over the place. And they're a firm providing consultancy, advice, support, and solutions to clients. And Dave is a big influencer on social. And Elizabeth Varghese, people and tech strategist and global leader, talent and HR strategy reinvention at IBM. And Elizabeth and her team deploy IBM's best thinking along with AI, blockchain, robotics, and other leading technologies to create powerful employee and HR experiences. Elizabeth is recognized, by the way, as a global key influencer in strategy and analytics, and has been listed as a top 100 influencer in the industry. I think Dave has been listed in various places as an influencer as well, because I only hang out with the coolest kids within the world of work. Right, well, that's my brief introduction there. Why don't we all start, though, by each of you taking a minute or so and introducing yourselves a bit more. Elizabeth, would you like to go first, followed perhaps by Dave and then by Chris?
Sure. So I think you've heard my background. I really work at the intersection of HR technology and talent and people strategy. And that's what I've been doing for over 20 years. And I think the most exciting thing about where we're at this time is all those promises and visions we had about, HR capturing data and insights are all possible because of what technology has kind of been able to do for us. So I think we're at the point where it's, your strategy and your talent strategy is just limited by your own imagination, because the technology we have can actually enable all of it. So really excited to be here and learn from Dave and Chris and you, Bill. Thank you for having me on your show.
And I'm Dave Millner. So I've worked in and around HR for about 35 years now. I seem to have been banging on about the same sort of topics for quite a long time about HR being more commercial, more value add, and obviously have spent probably the last 10 years or so focusing on people analytics, either through a practitioner or running through large engagement programs. And for the last 2 or 3 years have been doing my own thing under HR Curator, again, looking at transformation, and primarily, particularly in the last 15 months or so, spending a lot of time trying to promote the fact that to HR practitioners is that data and analytics is not as scary as they think, and that actually we all need to become more data informed in how we operate. So looking forward to the conversation.
So I'm Chris, and I'm the president and CEO of Fidello, and I've been doing this similar to Dave for way too long, 35 plus years, and in this space, and I've enjoyed it the whole time. My consulting company does both consulting activities and process activities for technological implementations, or for HR-based focused implementations, or just using your tools better along that line. So I loved what Elizabeth said. If you think it, you can do it. You're being constrained by your vision of what's going on, and that's been our motto for a long time. One size doesn't fit all. What do you want to do? How do you want to do it? Let's get it there. And the concept of the HR space becoming more valuable in the understanding of how they can play a significant role and how they can help shape and craft things. And it's driven by the data that we're capturing. It's the data we can look at and how we compare. No longer is it the day where, well, we just reinvented the sales process, so HR had nothing to do with it. It's now we can actually start to focus and push things forward and become a real player at the table. And so we help our clients do that. And it's exciting. I'm excited for our time today.
Okay, thank you everyone, and let's push things forward, shall we? And I'd like to start with a not so smaller question for you all, okay? In the absence of data-based decisions, every decision is an opinion or a hunch. How can people analytics help create alternative scenarios that can be predictive and have the best choice recommended? It would be great if all of you would like to have a go at this answer. You don't all have to, but it'd be great if you could all have a go. Who'd like to go first?
I'll kick off if you like. I mean, the way I look at it is quite simply is that the role of people analytics is to drive better informed decision making. It's not about taking decisions away from leaders or managers. It's about making sure that their intuition, their hunch, as you call it, Bill, is perhaps reinforced or challenged or sustained through a bit more of an evidence-based approach. We could talk for hours about all sorts of different case studies and all different ways of doing it. Let me just give you a very quick example. I was working with a Nordic manufacturing company a couple of months ago, launching a brand new product, revolutionizing their organization, and they therefore had to then look at how are we going to develop and implement this new product from sales through to manufacture. And they were looking at, what's the supply of what we've got, what's the demand we're going to need. And they then came up with 3 scenarios, which was, are we going to make our people learn those new skills? Can we do it? Should we just recruit the people who we know have got it externally? Or should we have an interim, some recruiting with some people switching? And because HR had collected capability data, it had worked through various scenarios, they were able to identify that actually scenario 1, in other words, the learning aspect, was the most effective, but not just the most effective from an employee point of view, but also from a cost perspective in terms of saving millions of euros in terms of redundancy costs and in recruiting costs. So that's a very, very little small scenario, but one where there was a business problem. We identified some evidence and some information that was available, identified which talent practice we needed to focus on, and then refined it, changed it in a way to try and drive a better decision. So that for me is where analytics is coming from. It's not going to go away. And you're absolutely right, Bill, to align technology and analytics together, because digital and data are, for me, 2 of the critical levers that HR are going to have to become more familiar with, whether they like it or not. So that's my initial thoughts. I'm sure Elizabeth can build on that in a much more articulate way.
You flatter me. Thank you, but I'm happy to jump in because I think, like you, I'm passionate about how we can use data. And I think we've all slogged through those years of balanced scorecards and, all the work we've done in HR as keeper of the flame, but without the actual information to support our decisions. And, one of everything you said, right? And one of the things we've been looking at how we're leveraging data using AI is actually in a very interesting space around the quantification of competencies and skills and the connection to compensation, right? So for the folks who worked in the OD space for decades, like me, we always talk about, it's great to have competencies, but how do you pay for them? The thing is now AI can help us do that because it can actually read competencies, make inferences about the level of your skill set. So you don't actually have to be self-reported or, a manager who has no idea what you do is filling out a form or correcting your ratings, right? So we are using skill inference at scale, but using AI at a very large conglomerate actually. And they're actually reading through these masses of data and making assumptions, not assumptions, but, judgments or evaluations of your actual competency level. So that's one thing they're able to do. The second thing related to that is making that connection to compensation. So at IBM, actually, we use this as a IBM manager of people. I'm able to get reports on, the competency levels of individuals based on their current levels and the future levels based on the alignment to our strategy, right? So if there are skills that are required for the future, I can actually pay somebody more, not just because of their performance, which is retrospective, but because of the skills that they might have, which are more, future forward and aligned to our emerging strategy. So what it has helped me do in this situation is, I can actually prioritize a part of a bonus amount, for example, right, to be allocated more to maybe somebody who's not necessarily the highest performer in terms of quantification of numbers, but who's actually the most strategic and valuable resource to the enterprise, and balance both those things. So again, just an example of how AI and data together can really fulfill that vision and that, I guess the dream we all had of kind of bringing HR to the table with some very solid information and data.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I'm just going to chip in real quick here. These are great examples that you both have offered along the line. We've watched it over the years too, because of the fact that when you start doing it, Dave, in your story, we had one company back in the 90s, actually late 90s. We did that assessment against all their engineers. They realized that to move to this new technology area, now this is again a self-reported thing, not using AI, Elizabeth, but way back then, but it was, do we develop, do we buy, do we whatever? And they realized that it was going to take about 5 years to develop their workforce. And they said, we can't do that. So they spent $1 billion and bought another company and absorbed that capability right into there. And then it became the core of their technology moving forward, and did great from that activity. So, there are lots of different things, over the years, we've done these things, we've come forward. When you have the data at the table, you can make those decisions like Elizabeth's talking about. It's just like, hey, we've got it here. It's no longer a guesswork. And in that example you gave, Elizabeth, that's brilliant from not just an engagement standpoint and maintaining a key asset that's going to be good for you in the future. Because if you just ran a 9-box against them, they probably, you're not going to think about it. You're going to kind of pigeonhole them where they're at. So that ability to forecast and future look is great. And also for workforce planning too, because you're going to look at that list and, and if you're using AI in the concept in the space of, future-based skills for where we're going to need based upon our strategy or for some of the products we're developing, if it's not there, you got to start sourcing it. So these are all great pieces. So cool.
And I think just piggybacking that a little bit, Chris, is that one of the things I've noticed is that when you use data, it seems to bring with it accountability, because, it's facts, there's information, there's evidence. And so therefore, I found that it seems to make accountability for making those decisions and for, looking at what's there, there's nowhere to hide. And I don't think that that's necessarily a bad thing, in today's world. We've got to make managers and leaders accountable for what they do. And I think that data is just helping that. It's being nudged a little bit along the way, I think
it's great too. And Bill, I know we're taking a little bit more on this one than you thought, but one of the other things though is important, I think, in the whole process. You've got to be a player at the table. You got to have that seat established already. You have to have the reputation that you can bring business acumen to the discussion, so that you can look at it and make these conversations versus, oh, you're compliance. Oh, you're this. So HR has to take that responsibility, and you have to earn it too, to get to that seat at the table and to be able to be viewed as a business partner.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, everyone. By the way, Elizabeth, you've got a beautiful mug. I just saw you take a sip from your mug. Very, 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 very attractive mug. I like the look of it there.
Wait, show the mug again. Show the mug again.
That's a fine vessel.
Oh, this one. Yes. It's a gift from a friend.
Of course, in the UK, mug is referred to as your face. So I wonder
that's
what
right,
you're going to say then.
I gave Bill the benefit of the doubt and assumed that he meant this.
Because this is
the good thing about this mug is it has a lid.
It's a sippy cup, a porcelain sippy cup. Yes.
Oh dear, that's true. In the UK, it does mean face. Gosh, I've forgotten. Right. Okay. Let's move on then. So the People and Performance podcast and the videos that we do like this as well. One of our big focuses is employee experience. Okay, we're all about performance, we're about employee engagement, and we're about the overall experience of employees. And there's been a lot of talk over the last 10 years or so of taking more from the customer experience and bringing that back into the workplace. So I'd like to ask of all of you, in your opinion, how important do you think it is to connect employee experience to the customer experience, and why? And in addition, perhaps, what can HR tech still learn from customer-focused tech experiences? Who'd like to go first?
So I'll go first again. Okay, whatever. It's an interest. There's a lot of information and data out there that makes a clear link between the relationship of customers and employees. And so if you treat your customers well, that's probably because your employees are being treated well and, are feeling good about their job, etc. I guess the pandemic, in a way has, to a certain extent, I think it may have pushed customer experience and the digital transformation a little bit into the background, particularly at the beginning of the pandemic, because, we were having to deal with unprecedented change. And we were probably thinking about, well, how are we going to improve our, rather than asking, how are we going to improve our customer experience, on our bottom line through technology, we were probably worried about how on earth can we use technology so we can just keep going and continue as a business, because obviously we had people having to operate in a very different way. But I think the point that I've sort of seen is that I think the pandemic has shown lots of organizations have lacked an employee experience approach. And I think they've been flying blind a little bit when it comes to their workforce. They've been just hoping that things are going to work. And I feel that, we've got to get back. And I think there was an article by McKinsey's earlier this month, where they were talking about the need to take a positive approach about experience. And I think they were talking about, there was something in the region of about, people who have a positive experience at work are probably 16 times more engaged, than those who have a negative experience, and are probably, less likely to stay. So I think there is a huge emphasis and importance upon experience, the way people feel, the way that they are supported with personalized technologies that can help them feel good. And I think if we can make the employee feel good, then, the contact center officer, the customer person you meet in a retail branch, whatever, are going to be feeling much better about themselves and therefore being able to make that customer feel more important. Because at the end of the day, the customers are paying our salaries. And so, we've got to make sure that the service we provide is absolutely spot on. And I think that's where I see the value of technology coming in, taking away some of these routine elements, which, are probably less motivating for people to do. Let's look at finding jobs that have got that sense of purpose that everybody seems to talk about, that have interest and make people more motivated and more committed to doing what they want to do. What do you think, Elizabeth? I mean, particularly with the automation aspect of the link between customers and employees.
You're spot on, right, Dave? And what we've been observing, and I think all of us, right, over the past decade, we've kind of seen some of those principles of customer segmentation, which really anchor a lot what we're doing with the employee space, right? So we started segmenting customers because we could, and we had the data on them. And I think we realized that it might actually not be a bad thing to do this for the employee base to really understand them better, right? And what I think, because of this kind of confluence of data and technology, we're able to personalize what they need to see by role, by hierarchy, right? And also based on what we want them to move towards from, in terms of meeting their aspirations or making their work better. So I think one of the things we have observed, around the employee experience, kind of taking it further than the employee engagement work of the past few decades, right? It really does make a difference. A better experience does actually affect your engagement. Right? So if your work is made easier for you, you actually are more engaged, you feel more productive, you are more productive. And then I think the second part of it is with the really explosion of how we've catered to the consumer taste and expectations on personalization, employees do expect Netflix at work, right? So they are expecting learning curation to happen with the principles of Netflix, right? A customized feed based on the way you like to learn, content you might have browsed in the past, parsing content that you might be interested in, versus specific or reading very large amounts of data, or personalization, in terms of what Amazon does as a consumer, right? The easy button to reorder things, knowing what you need. So I think some of those principles of consumer engagement have really transcended into the employee experience space. And what that means on a tactical level is that we're actually using technology to provide all of that, right? So I gave the example of the learning space. We're doing the same thing in career development, right? Personalizing career opportunities based on who you are and what you express interest in, bringing together the history of your learning with potential career paths in the organization, serving them up to you in a very consumable fashion. So I think all of those, the disruption of the HR processes by looking at the consumer or customer experience principles are really here to stay. And companies like ServiceNow and Salesforce, IBM, all of us are working in this space. Chris, what do you think? Would love to kind of get your perspective as well.
I think everything you're saying is to quote you, spot on. Okay, with what's going on there, it's important, and I love the just your track down career planning for people. What have you expressed interest in, especially with the AI piece, going back to the other question, where where are your skill sets, where are your competencies, where are your capabilities, and offering that kind of stuff that's there. It's kind of the digital marketing moment in the HR space, which is really cool. Going back to Dave, one of the things that we see just local, because and I say it's a local thing because it's the headquarters is near me here in this part of New York, but it's a supermarket. And you're like, a supermarket, okay, so what's the supermarket? Well, they're normally within the top 5 of the Forbes best places to work. And the CEO was once quoted as saying, he goes, I don't focus on my customers, I focus on my employees. Okay. And all of a sudden you're like, wow, he's got that. Now, flip the side, there was an independent survey for customer experience, and they ended up number 3 in the nation, behind Neiman Marcus and Ritz-Carlton, and they're a supermarket. They sell groceries. So this concept of being able to have what sometimes in parts of the industry called the spillover effect, Dave, where you're treating your employees so well that they just go and it oozes. So that whole employee experience and that way that you're making it there, and where Elizabeth, you guys are just tailoring it right to them, should help you with your whole focus on not just customers that are external, but internal customers too. The whole communication, the ease of working together, hey, it shouldn't be hard, it should be easy, we should be able to figure this out, we should be able to go there. And I think it really, that enablement through the HR technologies or the HR focus on this area really is increasing the capability of your workforce to do good stuff.
Yeah. No, I agree. I agree, Chris. I mean, the other point I would just throw in the equation is that quite rightly, Elizabeth talked about, experiences going beyond engagement. And I absolutely agree. And I guess what I've found is that, if you've got an employee that has a great experience at work and is engaged, you've got what I call the passionate employee, and who doesn't want a passionate employee in their workforce? So I think that's how I try and equate it into the type of person that we're trying to find in any organization.
Yeah, definitely. And we saw a lot of that too when we went to COVID and people had to work more from home. I know IBM's had that model of having people work remotely over the years and stuff like that already. But for a lot of organizations, it was interesting. There were some surveys that were done, which people were there were high numbers. I can't quote the number where they were, but they were a fairly high number that they were upset with the way their company handled the transition. Okay. And then you flip on it, it's like, okay, well, who planned that? Okay, that's a great question. But then you had others which were like, it was so wonderful, I loved it. And you're looking at it and saying, okay, cool, some people got it right, and how did we handle that? And that was one of those quick reactive moments that HR had the opportunity to shine. If you hadn't been prepared, fun stories, we may get to some of those later, but yeah, it was a great deal of opportunity to get that experience going, not just engaged, but that passion of like, hey, this company treated me well, I want to do right for them.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And on that note, I just wanted to add one more thing related to the whole COVID and the whole conversation, right? I've been hearing on the internet about the Great Resignation, right? And I just wanted to point out one thing. I actually don't think it's the Great Resignation. I made this up, but I do think it's really more the Great Reckoning, because to your point, Chris, right? It's not that people are leaving, they're actually going towards something they prefer more. So it's been this moment of insight for them to say, okay, what is my purpose? What do I really want? What is the experience I really want at work? And how can I find a situation that gets me that, right? It's really putting purpose at the heart of their decisions. So I just wanted to bring that up because, obviously COVID has exacerbated that. And I think we as HR professionals and C-suite leaders need to look at it that, from the perspective of this is a point of reckoning. So it's not doom and despair of resignation and sadness. It's a time to kind of align with it, and data and employee experience can actually help us do that.
Yeah, I love that. Can we steal that phrase, the Great Reckoning?
Yes, please, let's do it. Let's make it positive, because I think this, the pandemic has been very, very difficult, but it's also been a time for us to kind of pivot and make some really important decisions.
And people have had time to reflect and think, and consider, well, do I really want to do this? And is this really what I want? And I wonder if people's reluctance to go back to the office is not because they don't want to go back to the office, but do I want to go back onto that sort of wheel again, where I'm just commuting and I'm going into that. So I think you're absolutely right, Elizabeth. I think this is a very purpose-driven initiative, and I don't necessarily see the Great Resignation as being, a horror show. I think it'll be challenging for those organizations, absolutely, but that just gives opportunities for other people. So I think we've got to try and see this as a real opportunity again for the HR community to demonstrate what we can do. And I think that's where we need to really step up and show that, this isn't a challenge. It's not a problem, but it's something that is a real reckoning, to take your phrase, where people are making decisions, and we've got to respect that, and hopefully bring people into our organization because they've had a different thought about coming into that organization. So I think that's a great phrase, Elizabeth. I've written it down. I'm gonna pinch it. I'm sorry.
Let's do it. Let's make this a positive, inflection point for HR, right? And related to that, one other thing, I'm sure you folks have great examples of these too. I've folks, friends and clients in the financial services industry, and Dave, your point around the commute, right? The folks who left took the 4:30 train from, Poughkeepsie to make it to downtown Manhattan or the equivalent overseas, and never seen their kids. Come March 15th, well, and they did that because it was not possible to trade from, home, right? But come March 15th, monitors were shipped home, and, Wall Street was, out of people's bedrooms and, or bathrooms or, patios, right? So the truth is that it can be done. And if the organization seeks to mirror that purpose, it doesn't have to be a resignation. It can truly be a reckoning of what's important. So anyway, I think we are completely aligned. Let's make this positive.
Sorry, Bill, we're taking your agenda away from you here. Yeah. Sorry.
The Great Reckoning. I love that. Just for the records, everyone, copyright Elizabeth Fugazi. She said it first. Okay, these other guys are trying to nick it. Also, I was trying to think of an organization where one would work where it's not a good thing to be positive and super happy all the time. The only one I can think of was maybe a funeral directors. Other than that, I would imagine it's a very good thing to have in every single organization. Hey, Dave, my next question is geared towards you, and I feel like I've maybe got the wrong audience here, but I'm here to play devil's advocate, and I would invite Chris and Elizabeth to respond as well to your answer. And this question is really around the fact that you advocate a need for HR to be more commercial in its approach, and you mentioned that in your introduction earlier. Yeah. At a high level, Dave, what do you mean by this? How would you respond to the assertion that there's a concern that data and money are increasingly taking over the priorities of HR at the expense of empathy and the human touch? Yeah. Maybe after you've responded, Chris and Elizabeth, if you'd like to add anything, please do.
Yeah, sure. I mean, go back to basics. What is commerciality? It's, for me, it's about something that enables individuals to deliver excellent performance in a business or a business unit that will either increase revenue, sales, profitability, cash generations better, shareholder values better, or for public sector, better value for money, higher levels of productivity. So commercialism, is an important part, and we need to bear in mind is that this commercial aspect that pays for the HR function, that pays for people's jobs. And so I'm not advocating that, commerciality is more important than people. But I think the way I look at commerciality is it falls probably into 4 buckets. So, financial insight. We need HR people who have a perspective of an understanding about where we make money and how we make money. Because if we don't know, we can't trigger those jobs and find those jobs and work with people to improve their performance. we've got to have a view externally about what's going on. We need to have a view and understand internally about the strategy, how it works, and all that great stuff. And we need to be what I regard as organizationally savvy, know about how to get things done in an organization. You know, we've all worked in corporates, and we all know is that you need to find champions and people who you can use and abuse sometimes in the very best possible way to help you get something across. So that's what I think commercialism is made up of. And you know, the way I look at it, I run workshops all over the world trying to talk to HR people, and they always say the same thing. Oh yeah, but I didn't join HR, you know, to do data and technology, you know, and my perspective is, well, maybe not, but that is the future of HR. And the way I look at it is that HR is the advocate of the people. They're the advocate of the workforces. And so therefore, you know, behind every number, behind every piece of data, there is a person. And so therefore thinking about it in that way brings it home, is that maybe we don't have the same degree of relationships that we used to have, you know, in getting to know the, you know, all the employees that are working in the client base that you have. But I think the key for me is that we have got to still remain in the HR function as the advocates of what is the right thing to do. But having said that, we have also got to understand is that we have an obligation to the organization. We need to know how to be successful, both from an organizational and an HR perspective. And we have to focus on outcomes, because that's where the digital world is taking us through. You know, Elizabeth's going to talk to us a little bit about the blockchain, you know, which I'm really excited to hear about. And the whole point of the technology is not technology for technology's sake. It's because it's a more efficient way of enabling us to get in, you know, processes and activities done. And so I think this is about augmenting how we operate. I don't see it as necessarily a replacement or a replication. I see it as a way of augmenting and ensuring that we are focused on what makes the biggest difference to the organization. Because if organizations don't make money, there will be no jobs, there will be no HR functions. So, you know, I'm sorry, we have to understand is that the world has changed. You know, when I joined Personnel a very long time ago, it was a completely different world where we were, you know, the soothsayers who were looking after the best needs of people and all this sort of stuff. We are still doing it, but we're having to do it in a different way, through personalized technology, through using data and information to make better decisions that are going to make the workforce more productive, more motivated, and more committed to what we do. So that's where I sort of see this perspective. I see it as really promoting the human touch, but we're having to do it in a different way to maybe how we used to do it many years ago.
Wonderful, thank you very much. Elizabeth, if you'd like to add anything to that, I just ask, please don't mention blockchain, because we're going to talk about that in just a moment.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I was just going to, you know, I was trying to make the bridge with NFTs and the Great Reckoning, because it brings us to blockchain, but I won't. But I think you're absolutely right. You have to pay using analytics. You have to understand the financials of an organization. And the truth is that, you know, maybe it was a little more difficult before. It's not anymore. So that we've kind of run out of excuses. So, you know, HR can't say that, oh, you know, we're disconnected, the data's not available, we're one step removed. It's really a limitation of your intent and purpose. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's not your parents' HR anymore.
No.
Or personnel. No. Yeah, not at all.
No, not at all. We're a business function, and we need to remember that.
Yep.
Yes, absolutely. And, you know, related to that, I was just kind of reminded of, you know, when back in the day, and I've worked in HR for, gosh, over 20, not close to more than two decades, right, globally. And, you know, back in the day when I did my master's in India in HR, you know, we took the OB class, the labor economics, the statistics, all of that. And then those were really great courses, and they helped, you know, as in the world of work. But to the point, Dave, you were making, right, as we started working in the 90s, the EHR was like the big, you know, hot topic, right? We thought we were so cool running around enabling HR processes, right? But you had to learn that. And then I remember evaluating SuccessFactors as a performance management vendor in 1999, right? Because that's what they were, and look what they are today. So I think that arc of learning is as true in HR as in everything else. And I think that's the message really that we as HR practitioners need to embrace. Our portfolio of requirements has changed because we always were a business function. We just have no excuse for not being one right now.
Absolutely.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, everyone. Elizabeth, you're not going to guess what my next question is about at all. I bet you've got no idea what my next question is about. It's about blockchain. In your opinion, and I should just preface this by saying you and I had a wonderful conversation on the HR Chat podcast. Check it out, everyone. A while back, and you and I we did a very deep dive into blockchain and its uses within HR and recruitment technologies, particularly. But maybe you can give a bit of an overview for this audience as to how can blockchain turn HR processes and HR tech into a company's competitive advantage.
Sure. So how long do we have? A couple of hours now. So I'll keep it short. And as you may have gathered, speaking fast is usually one of my weaknesses. But sometimes, because I'm completely unintelligible, but sometimes it's a strength because I can say many things quickly. None of which anyway. But so in terms of blockchain, I think the important thing about blockchain in all our conversations is to think about it the way we think about the internet or a plane that you're taking to go somewhere, right? It's less about how it works and is it thrust and lift and drag, or what's happening with the HTTPS security sites, and more about what can the technology, the internet, do for us. How can it transform what we do? And I'll be happy to talk about the technology if needed, but I'm just saying we won't focus on that today. It's really about how can we use it and how can we use the principles and the constructs of blockchain in disrupting our HR work, right? So with that, I just want to take one step back, and when we just reflect upon our world of work, right? We're 6 billion people, right? Most of them are not in the formal sector. And in countries like Africa, in countries in Africa or in India, over 80-85% are in the informal sector, right? So essentially, as the human race, we are tapping into a tiny fraction of our potential in terms of what we can do from a capability perspective, right? So the fundamental problem we have in HR, which translates to, I think, everywhere, is one, identifying what is it we need our people to do. The second is, finding those people, knowing that they actually have the skills they need, and then helping them grow into whatever we need, right? So that's the classic talent attraction, talent strategy decoding, career development. What blockchain does with 3 principles, the provenance, the immutability, and the decentralized ledger, it disrupts, helps us solve these problems. So I just want to kind of, mention that as a preface. Now, when you think about, from a skills, so as I said, right, HR has a number of problems we do, right, finding people. But the first one is really strategy decoding into skills. So we all talked about that a little bit, but jobs have become more complex, and they're actually constructed of Lego blocks of different skills, right? So it's not enough for me to have that OB class and that experience. I also need information on portals and content optimization and content curation. So an HR job, like every other job, is actually a construction of a number of different skill sets. And if we cannot decode strategy of an enterprise into those individual Lego blocks of what's it really going to take, we can't really execute on it. So that first aspect of decoding strategy is important. And I mentioned that because that's what makes blockchain so powerful. What it does is when you build consortiums or teams of trust that share information with permissions and rules, in the world of HR, it can help us find candidates who have their credentials validated using a blockchain. So we're seeing that with the learning credentialing network that IBM is working. We work with the US government on that. We're working with a number of organizations and universities, essentially saying that, if you're an individual looking for a job, we'll help you decode your skills, right? It doesn't have to be your degree, it's skills. And we'll help validate that you, Elizabeth, actually, understand this topic and you have information about this. So even without a formal degree, there's a method to validate your skill base. And then the second thing it does, it helps organizations kind of match to those skill levels. So kind of opening the aperture on people who might have those skills. This is tremendously impactful for us as, again, as a human race, because we can decode strategy across or skills across many populations who may or may not have college degrees, but might have skills like coding or hacking or content curation, and match them up to work that can be done. So that's also the potential of companies like Upwork and everything that's happening in the gig economy. The challenge remains on the validation part, which is what blockchain can solve. So let me just pause there, Bill, and I don't know if that's a quick summary that I'd love to talk more about how that actually gets addressed and how we make it happen, but would love to hear, Dave, your and Chris's reactions too on what you're seeing in blockchain and how some of this is playing out.
I think blockchain is an incredibly powerful tool, and I think if you look at the fact that what it can do at a very simple level is sort of, it could be verification of candidates' particular capabilities, maybe getting rid of the age-old concerns that people have about CVs, and actually having, for example, somebody verifying that actually, yes, they did actually deliver that project that they've talked about. So that could be one simple thing. I know obviously payments and worker payments can be done in a different way. So there is a lot of talk about it, and I think again that this is just an opportunity where HR can be seen to be taking out some of the areas that we've probably sat in our comfort zones for too long doing administrative types of activities. For me, I just think that the growth of the blockchain movement is just going to be another lever which will enable HR to really focus on those critical talent processes that need to either A, be improved, or B, need to be more strategically focused. So I'm a big promoter of it, and I think it's a very exciting initiative, and I think it's got lots of different opportunities that we probably not even thought enough about at the moment, I think.
Yeah, I think it's brilliant, just the ability to just to dissect the strategy and figure out what the real needs are. And I love the fact that when you're pulling pieces together, and Dave, you mentioned the CV, but the reality of it is, when I first started this company, we were doing some things that weren't even taught in school. It was early interactive learning online, or not online, but on using laser video discs to talk about hold AM, and all these things really didn't play out. And so you couldn't necessarily go to and say, I need somebody with a PhD in this, because it didn't exist, nor did the masters, nor did the bachelors or even associates. So, when you can look at a person's pure skill sets and discern that, you're going to start to end up with people that fit your needs better.
Yeah.
And really align them. And it's not only fitting the needs for the business sake, but, we're on an HR thing. It's for the people. You're given reward. Somebody may not have had that opportunity to go through and get their PhD or whatever. And all of a sudden you're rewarding them because they're actually probably performing better than some of those other people.
Yeah, there could be more network teams. There could be a whole host of different things that, that, as I say, we've probably not even thought significantly enough about, which, I think it can be a very powerful way of helping make better resourcing operational type decisions, which can only add value to the experience at work.
Yeah, and we fumbled through it in the past. At least I have with some of my customers. But as we continue to get the data analytics down, and we continue to do things like your AI, which is big in this process, I'm sure, it really drives it home that you can do this. And it's it's enabling that vision that we've had for a while of getting the best person to the best place for the best results. So yeah.
And and over the decades, I think we've all kind of recognized, right, that the degree is not necessarily the best indicator of skills, or you don't necessarily need a degree to accomplish a task. And we've heard of the the examples that are touted, whether it's Bill Gates or whoever might have dropped out, right, of a particular organization. But the truth is that there are lots of people who don't even get into those organizations who are very good. And if we can help them work to their strengths and decode the requirements of the role, we can actually find the best person for the job. The other thing that I think related to everything we're discussing is, when you think about neurodivergency, or people who are atypical from atypical neurotypes in terms of cognitive processing, people who may not necessarily do well in a job interview or write an essay properly. They might still be the best person to write code or become a developer. So in many ways, what we're really kind of, doing with all of this is uncovering what people, how people can contribute in the most optimal fashion. So I'll be talking about some of these things in my book, which is coming out on blockchain, the future of how we live and work in a month or so. But I think that aspect of looking at the entire talent ecosystem is what blockchain can provide us. So we're not restricted to the employees we have today. We can look at the contingent workforce. We're also not restricted to the formal sector or the typical schools we hire from. We can look at it outside of it, and we can look outside our geographical boundaries or, the formal, informal sector. So I think that aspect of disrupting the ecosystem of talent, I think, is really one of the most powerful things we'll be able to see with this coming out.
And I would assume, and I'm just taking a shot at this one, Elizabeth, but I would think you could deconstruct also the learning at a university gives too, and understand better what the people should be walking out with. Even if they come out with that degree in their hand, they should have had at least these types of pieces. So even just reverse engineering what you're seeing from that graduate coming forward too.
Absolutely, spot on. And I think eventually, making sure that we have that thread of continuity around skill acquisition, knowing and experiences and credentials and employment history, so that that's all available in a validated fashion. I think the other part, which kind of comes with all of this, is the security and the self-sovereignty of identity and how we manage it. And I just mentioned that here because as we think about how we make all of this happen, it also kind of brings us to the digital identity concept, which blockchain enables, and the permissions of how you can let people see what you need them to see about you, right? Whether it's your banking transaction or paying a contingent employee or your degree certificate from your high school or undergrad. So lots of very interesting times, I think, lie ahead for us.
Yeah, they do. Plus data privacy acts too. So yeah, we got to work around all that fun stuff. So.
Okay. I've got so many more questions for you all, but we're pretty much out of time here.
We've run havoc on this, haven't we, Bill? Really?
Well, that's why they call it a panel, right?
Yeah.
The panelists just go for it, and there's good conversations happening. But what it means is we've only got a couple of minutes left, and I want to make sure that Dave and Elizabeth and Chris all have enough time just to tell everybody how they can learn more about them. So Chris, I'm going to challenge you to answer in 1 minute or less.
Okay, let me get a big breath. Here we go.
Okay.
And then who goes after me?
So no, this is what I'd like to challenge you with is just to reflect a little bit in under a minute on some of your top learnings from what you've heard today from Dave and from Elizabeth.
Well, first of all, I've been engrossed in the conversation. It has been a joy to talk to the two of you here, and it's been really fun for me. It's the concept that we've been touching on about adding value to the position of the HR staff, from that commercialization phrasing that Dave, you're using, into the fact that, everything that Elizabeth, you're doing with bringing it to the table and weaving in the analytics, specifically in the IBM world, and how it can help everybody else too, because that's a lot of what you do, is not only do it internally, but you look to turn it out externally as well. But, the pieces that are there, we're coming together. It is, we started this by saying, for me, saying over 35 years of working in this space, this is kind of the excitement that I'm having of what I thought about 35 years ago. How do we make things happen better? And how can we justify that? And use of numbers and return on investment. Everything is coming together with the ability to gather data, to analyze data, and to process data. And so to hear it come together in each of you expressing different thoughts and needs around it, and situations that you've encountered, makes it really, touch home for me, but it should also touch home for our listeners and our viewers on here, that, we're at this age. It's no longer you're just here in HR and you're just running compliance checklists and you're worried about, making sure payroll. And for some people, that still is what they're having to deal with, but there is a future and there is an opportunity to move forward. And I think that vision is captured by both of your comments today. So thank you.
Awesome. That was about 60 seconds. Good work, Chris. So it took 35 years, but here we are living in the future. We're way past Back to the Future 2, right? And now finally, these capabilities are available to us. Okay, just finally then, If you each want to take 30 seconds, no more than about 30 seconds, to let folk know how they can learn more about and connect with you. Let's go Chris, then Elizabeth, then Dave.
Great. You can hook up with me on LinkedIn, Chris Bjorling. I'd love to have everybody connect with me that way. And then also you can find out more about our company Fidello at fidello.com. And that's FIDELLO.com.
Great. Elizabeth Varghese on LinkedIn, best way to reach me. And, I do talk about some of these topics through LinkedIn Live and a few other things. So look forward to connecting with all of you, and let's keep the conversation going. This is our time. It's HR's time.
And for me, just connect with me, Dave Millner, on LinkedIn, or follow me on Twitter with HR Curator. There's 29,500 HR people following me for some unknown reason. So join the crowd and see what articles I'm sharing on a daily basis that hopefully will help you take forward the challenge, because as Elizabeth said, this is our time. We've shown what we can do during the pandemic. Now we've got to really grasp the opportunity and move forward in a world of data, digital, and obviously designing the organization of the future. So please do connect.
Wonderful. And I should just add also, please do check out the People and Performance podcast, the audio version of this. Otherwise, what's the point of me and Chris doing it? Jeez. Okay, well, that just leaves me to say today, there's so much more I wanted to talk to the three of you about today. I'm definitely going to hound you about doing another one of these in the near future. But for now, Dave, Elizabeth, and Chris, thank you very much for being panelists today.
Cool, thanks.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.